Hello, Year 6. So, final lesson of the week for English. And we'll get straight on with it. I've already gone over the date and things with you whilst we were doing Big Read. So, little bit of a starter for you. Yesterday, in our starter, we looked at hyperbole, one of those figurative language techniques. Today, we're looking at personification, which is another one of those figurative language techniques that we won't have time to cover in full lessons. So we're going to try and cover them in our starters. They're simple, we've covered them before, so they make a perfect starter, really. Personification, then. The key to remembering what personification is just remember the word person at the start of it. And it's simply when a type of animal, plant, any non-living object, really, is given the characteristics of a person, of a human. So these might include emotions, sensations, physical movements, speech. All of that is personification, making something seem as if it is a person, which is why it's easy to remember. We've got person at the beginning. So an example might be lightning danced across the sky. Really nice sentence, just isn't realistic, is it? Lightning doesn't really dance. That's the sort of thing a person does. But it's a really good figurative language sentence, really powerful, really descriptive. It immediately brings to mind for me exactly what that lightning's doing. So, as it says, lightning can't really dance, but it does help us create the impression that the lightning is moving really quickly and almost rhythmically. Okay, so what would I like you to do? First thing I'd like you to do, starting relatively simple, is I'd just like you to make full sentences out of these halved sentences. What does the beginning connect up to make a personified figurative language sentence? Pause the video and write them out as full sentences. I'll then show you what the right answers would have been. Speak to you again in a moment. Okay, so the gentle waves stroked the shoreline. The twisting vines suffocated the crumbling house. The sun's fierce beams hit our vulnerable skin. The fire alarm screamed a warning to us, and the moon peeked over the clouds. Hopefully they were the sentences you wrote down. I'll see when you send them in later. One more thing for you to be doing then before we move on to the main activity. Last thing about personification. I'd like you to think about different things that rain might do that a human can also do. And then I'd like you to use that word bank to create some sentences that describe rain using personification. So there's some good ones there. They're all things that you might decide, or some of them are things that you might decide that rain could be described as doing that humans can also do. You're going to then have a go. I think 3, 4 maximum sentences, please, that use personification using some of those words down at the bottom there. I look forward to reading them. When you've done that, start the video up again and we'll move on to a bit of a recap on last lesson and then also looking at today's activity. Speak to you in a moment. Okay, so a bit of a recap then on what we did yesterday. Yesterday, we were looking at examples from the text where you could see different skills being used, and I asked different challenges of different people to look out for, and I've color-coded the right things to look for there. So one of the things I set for challenge 1 on those green challenges was to just use simple synonyms for the word said. So we've got things like Elliot replied, saying this. For orange, I asked you to use speech and put in narration between speech that sort of began to tell us how the movement of the people or how they were, what they were feeling as they said their lines. So for example, yeah, it came from such a pathetic and seemingly helpless figure. And the red challenge was to use show not tell to give me an idea of how the characters were feeling as they said their lines. So Elliot stumbling back suggests he's quite nervous. The figure towering over him might give more reason why he might be scared. So that was what we looked at yesterday, the way that we can weave in our narration in between our speech, our direct speech, to help build character, to build setting, to build mood, to help engage the reader and to make the reading experience all the more enjoyable. Today, we're beginning to look at the way that we can use authorial technique in our writing. And what I'll be looking for is that you're understanding that authors write for effect. They don't just write just to pass the time. They write to try and create an effect, to make you feel a certain way. And we're going to hopefully be using a range of sentence types to engage the reader. I'd like you to have a go at identifying which sentence types work best for each specific purpose, though. So, what does some of this mean? Authorial technique. Let's start there. Authorial techniques. These are the kinds of techniques that authors use to engage their reader. That's where the word authorial and author come from. We'll just go back briefly. So we're going to be looking at ways in which authors use, or techniques that authors use, to really engage their reader, to grab their reader and keep their attention, to keep them on edge, to keep them excited, to make them upset if they want to at certain times, to get whatever effect they want. And that's how we do it with authorial techniques. So there are, as I've said, loads and loads and loads of different ways that authors use to engage their readers. One of them, though, is with really good quality dialogue. And we looked at that yesterday. So by having really good dialogue, believable dialogue that pushes the narrative, continues the story, builds the character, sets the scene, just like we looked at yesterday, weaving narration and dialogue together, that is a really good authorial technique. Another good authorial technique, though, is this type of sentence. Now, if you're in Cyprus, you'll have seen these Alan Peake sentences before, and we're going to choose 5 today to look at and have a go at. One of these Alan Peake sentences, which feel free to look up Alan Peake exciting sentence types online, you can see all of them then, not just the 5 I've chosen today, is the tell and then show 3 examples. Tell and show 3 examples is a really good technique when you're trying to build tension in a narrative. It's also good if you're trying to sort of use that show not tell technique, although obviously it does tell as well, but it's a good practice to get in that idea of showing. And what you do is you tell me how a character is feeling. For example, here, Virgo was getting increasingly worried. You then put a full colon, not a semicolon, a full colon. After that, you then give 3 examples that prove that Virgo is feeling increasingly worried. So that prove whatever you've just told your reader. So Virgo was getting increasingly worried, I'm telling you. Pacing forwards and backwards, muttering under her breath, eyes darting repeatedly back to the cave mouth. So right there, you can see that I'm telling you how somebody feels, and then I'm showing you 3 ways in which they are showing that emotion. You separate your 3 with semicolons, and then you should be ending with a full stop, which I've somehow managed to miss, but you should then have a full stop. So that is the tell and show 3 examples technique, one of the authorial techniques. Another one is this technique, which is called the more the more. The more is a really useful technique for a 3rd person narrator to use, which is what we're using in our Hot Right, so that's good. And they use it when they're explaining how a character is feeling at a certain point in the story. And it's another really simple one. It's just connected up with some commas. And you just say, the more something happened, the more this thing happened. So in this case, we've got the more that the strange, stooped figure spoke to Eliot, the more he found himself mesmerized by him. So, really useful technique. Gets lots of detail in, helps really sort of get the idea of how a character is feeling across, which you can do as a 3rd person narrator. You can say how someone's feeling, because you have that power when you have a 3rd person narrator to go in and out of people's minds, know their thoughts, know their feelings. So that is the more the more. Next one then, number 3 of 5, some and others. Now, some and others is a trickier one, but it's a good one to use if you want to relate the events of a story, but with a real life example. So a lot of stories are really fictional. You couldn't possibly believe them to be real life things. However, we can then link them to something real, and that emphasizes the incredible events of the story. So you simply say, some people do this, then you have a semicolon, other people do this, and you want those two things to be opposites. Some people like the sunshine, semicolon, other people love it when it rains. So you want them to be two different things. My example here is, some constellations on the Zodiac Council might not have cared what happens to a simple mortal boy, semicolon. Others, brackets, like Virgo, would not let any harm come to someone else, even if that someone were only a mortal. And the nice thing about semicolons, when you're connecting two main clauses like we are here, you can still have a subordinate clause in there, like I have, even if that someone were only a mortal. So that is the some and others technique. 3 out of 5. Let's have a look at number 4. Number 4 is the two pairs technique. This is just a really good way of getting in character development, really building up how a character's feeling and using you to really show off your vocabulary. So it's a good way to engage the reader and make them really understand how the character's feeling, and at the same time showing off all of those powerful adjectives that you know. So I've got, and all you do is you have 2 description words, comma, 2 description words connected with an and. Confused and worried, comma, anxious and afraid, comma, Elliot knew he really shouldn't be trusting a single word that this man said. So you've got 2 really good descriptive words, either descriptive verbs or adjectives that are really describing, connected up with an and then separated with a comma. That's all 2 pairs is, but it allows you to really drive home that point. Repetition is always really good when used properly, and this is a good example of using it properly. 4 out of 5. Let's have a look at the 5th one. 5th and final authorial technique for today is when, then. Another good way of getting semicolons in. You'll have noticed that 3 out of the 5 today use semicolons, which is good because that's one of the things that we had on our success criteria, and also one of the things we're going to be looking at later in this unit, so next week in fact. When, then is a really powerful way to create a sense of atmosphere, to get your reader to feel like they're involved in the story. And it can be used to simultaneously, that means at the same time, develop character and setting, which is useful because we want to be concise so that we don't get our reader bored by sort of dribbling on and talking nonsense. So what we do for when, then, as it says in the name, we use the word when 3 times to start a main clause, and we separate those main clauses with a semicolon. In fact, they're not a main clause. We're listing, so we're listing with a semicolon because there's more than one word in each section of the list. And all you do is you build the tension. When the risks are high, semicolon. When there are lives at stake, semicolon. When your friends need you, comma, then you find out what you're really capable of. That's an example of when you're using it. So you're just adding to it each time. You could say, when you've been given an impossible task, when you don't know how to complete it, when you're worried you're going to get it wrong, then you can turn to your friends to support you. That's the idea. So you're just using these 3 things and you're ramping up the tension each time. You're building that atmosphere, setting the scene, setting the mood. So that's 5 out of 5. So what are we doing with them then today? Today, your main task is to use those sentence types. That means you'll probably want to go back to the video, pause it on each screen, see what the different techniques are so that you can then use them yourself. There's 3 different tasks as we're trying to do as often as we can at the moment in our English. There's the green, the orange, and the red task getting progressively harder. If you choose to do the green task today, I want you to write 5 sentences using the sentence types we've just looked at, and I simply want you to describe to me how Elliot felt when he met prisoner 42. He's not met him yet in the story as far as we've read it. This is your opinion of how he would feel as he meets prisoner 42. So you don't need to know for certain. You're not looking for an exact answer. This is your opinion. How will he feel when he meets this terrifying prisoner? And I'd like you to write 5 sentences that use some of those techniques we've just gone over. Orange task, you're doing 5 sentences as well, and you're doing about Elliot and Virgo when they meet prisoner 42. But I want you to make sure you've covered all 5 of those sentence types. If you want to do more than 5 sentences, that's fine. You might think, oh, I really like that technique. I want to practice it a few times. But I need a minimum of 5, and they need to cover all 5 of the techniques. Red task, you're essentially doing a similar job, but you're going to combine it to a paragraph. So I'd like you to write a paragraph, please, that continues the story of Elliot going into the cave where prisoner 42 is kept. And I want you in that paragraph to use a range of sentence types and integrate dialogue if you can. That bit's not crucial, that's not necessary, but that's like a challenge up, really. Your paragraph needs to be at least 7 sentences long. So that should allow you to use all of those different sentence types and maybe use 1 of them or 2 of them more than once. That's everybody's challenge today. This is one of those lessons where you're probably going to want to look back at the video. You're probably going to want to click back, look at things again, start and stop the video, watch it in snippets so that you can get the bits that you need. It's not going to be one where you want to just now jump into the task and don't watch it back. Go back, watch what I've said about each one of the 5 techniques, use them one at a time as I've just told you about them. That's the way you'll get the best from this. These are really, really good techniques. They are higher order level punctuation techniques, so they get all of that more difficult punctuation in. They do it in an accurate way, they do it in an exciting way, and it's one of the best ways to make sure we're improving our writing. So do make sure you're listening to this and working hard on it. Can't wait to read these sentences. Cyprus, every time we've used these sentences, it's been some of the best writing you've done. So I'm expecting that from you. Banyan, I'm hoping you appreciate them just as much, and I'm looking forward to seeing if you can do even better. Can't wait to read them. Have a lovely weekend though, because I won't be speaking to you again now until Monday. I am looking forward to reading all of your work though. So I'll be giving you some feedback today, but I'll speak to you again properly on Monday. Have a lovely weekend. Goodbye.